You ever stumbled across something random that just shouldn't have the power to flip your whole life upside down, but somehow does? That's what happened to 17-year-old Jason Morris on an ordinary Saturday afternoon in Portland, Oregon. No drama, no warning, no spooky storm outside. Just him, alone in his parents' dusty garage, cleaning out old boxes to make room for his new workout bench.
Simple, right?
But nestled between cracked plastic Halloween buckets and tangled-up Christmas lights was a small, beat-up cardboard box sealed with yellowing tape. Inside, a single black VHS tape with no label, no title, no markings, just that ominous hum of mystery you could almost feel when you touched it. He didn't think much of it at first. I mean, who even owns a VHS player anymore? But something about that tape, the way it was hidden, the way it was intentionally buried beneath decades of forgotten clutter, it felt like it wasn't meant to be found. And the second he pressed play, everything he thought he knew about his life, his family, and himself came crashing down. Now, before you start thinking this is some overhyped TikTok urban legend or another one of those creepypasta-type deals floating around Reddit, let me promise you, this story is different. And yeah, I get it. You've seen a million life-changing discovery thumbnails on YouTube. But this one, what you're about to hear, it's real, it's raw, and it hits in a way that makes you look at your own past with new eyes. Because here's the twist. What Jason found on that tape didn't just expose a hidden chapter of his family's history, it rewrote the entire book. There's a reason this video is trending right now and why thousands of people are searching for VHS tape mystery solved, hidden family secrets, and real-life found footage stories. This story taps into something deeper, something universal. Our desperate curiosity about the unknown, and our fear that maybe, just maybe, our lives aren't built on the truth we think they are. Let's pause here for a second, because I want to talk directly to you. Yeah, you watching this on your phone or TV or laptop right now, maybe with a snack in hand, maybe on your lunch break, maybe late at night when you're supposed to be sleeping. This isn't just a story about a teenage boy and an old tape. This is about you. Because every family has secrets. Every house has corners that haven't been touched in years. And the moment you ask yourself, what if I found something like that? That's when this story starts to feel personal. That's when it hooks you deep. And I want you to stick with me because you'll get the answer you came for. The one that made you click on this video in the first place. But it won't come in the first 5 minutes. This story unravels like a puzzle, and every piece that falls into place gets darker, stranger, and more shocking. So if you want the truth, the full truth, you'll need to see this through to the very end. Now, let's set the stage. Jason was your typical high school senior, quiet, a little awkward, into retro games and old tech, the kind of kid who still browses thrift stores for scratched-up Nintendo 64 cartridges. His dad, a strict ex-Marine with a gruff voice and a no-nonsense attitude, had always been kind of distant. His mom, sweet, nurturing, the type to pack handwritten notes into his lunch, even though he begged her not to. The family was normal. At least that's what Jason thought. Until that tape showed him otherwise. It wasn't just the footage itself that chilled him to the bone. It was the person holding the camera. Someone who should not have been alive. Someone who wasn't supposed to be in the picture at all. And worse, the things being said on the tape, they didn't sound scripted. They didn't feel like a prank or a home video gone weird. They felt intentional. Like a message meant for someone, maybe for him, years after the fact. The atmosphere in that garage shifted the moment he hit play. You know that feeling when something in your gut tells you to stop watching, but your brain won't let you? That's where Jason was. Static flickered. The screen wavered, and a dark room came into view. A woman's voice, familiar, yet off, spoke softly from behind the camera. At first, it sounded like a lullaby. Then it grew distorted. More urgent. She whispered things that didn't make sense. Coordinates, dates, names. She spoke of him, a boy with sandy hair and a crescent-shaped birthmark on his wrist. Jason froze. That was his birthmark. And that's when he realized, this tape wasn't just random footage. It was a clue. Or worse, a warning. I want you to really take a second here. Imagine you're in his shoes. You're watching a tape someone went to great lengths to hide. You're hearing your own life referenced before you were even born. You're seeing a version of your family that doesn't match anything you've ever known. That's the kind of existential crisis that doesn't come with a manual. Jason didn't sleep that night. He rewatched the tape 10 times. Then he did what any of us might do. He started digging. Not just online, but in his own home. Old photo albums, birth certificates, letters, files locked in cabinets he never had the key to. What he uncovered sent shockwaves through everything he believed about who he was, and worse, it triggered a chain reaction that brought the past roaring back to life. People started showing up. People who claimed to know things about him. About his real origins. About things his parents never wanted him to find out. One of them even said, "You were never supposed to watch that tape." Let that sink in. This isn't just some found footage horror you'll forget tomorrow. This is the kind of story that lingers. That creeps into the quiet parts of your mind when you're lying in bed. Because it asks you the question, what don't you know about your own life? What lies have you accepted as truth just because it was easier that way? Jason thought he was just cleaning the garage. Instead, he uncovered a decades-old conspiracy involving a missing child, a falsified identity, and something far more sinister than just family secrets. And as the truth starts to unfold, it becomes painfully clear. This tape wasn't hidden to protect anyone. It was hidden to protect everyone else from him. Now, I know you're locked in. I can feel it. You're already forming theories in your head. Was Jason adopted? Was someone in his family a criminal? Did he witness something traumatic as a child that was erased from his memory? You're not wrong to wonder. But trust me when I say, you don't know the half of it. And if you think the tape is the scariest part of the story, just wait. What comes next shouldn't have happened. But it did. And it's all connected in ways that no one, not even Jason, could have predicted. So stay with me. Because in the next part of this story, everything you think you know about Jason's past, his parents, and the woman behind that camera is going to be turned on its head. But before we get there, there's one more thing you need to see. One more moment in the tape. The frame that made Jason gasp, pause the screen, and whisper, "That's not possible." What he saw. That's where everything truly begins. Jason Morris had always been the kind of teen who faded into the background. Not out of insecurity, though he carried his fair share of that, but more because he never felt like he truly belonged anywhere. He wasn't the quarterback, the theater kid, or the class clown. He was just there, hovering on the edge of friend groups, showing up to school on time, doing enough to pass, never enough to stand out. His closest friend, Ryan Thompson, a comic book-obsessed conspiracy theorist who had a part-time job at the local electronics recycling center, was probably the only person who really understood Jason's need to find meaning in forgotten things. They spent weekends digging through bins for old Game Boys and rewiring broken speakers. For Jason, there was always something calming about piecing things together, about bringing dead tech back to life. But maybe, just maybe, that's what made him a target for what was about to happen. Maybe his love for the obsolete, for the abandoned, was the reason the tape came into his life at all. The week before he found the tape, Jason had been grounded. Not for anything dramatic, just for skipping curfew 3 nights in a row. His dad, always quick with rules and slow with reasons, had lost it when Jason came home after midnight without texting. It didn't matter that he was just at Ryan's house. What mattered to his dad was control. That same week, Jason had noticed something strange during dinner. His mom, usually cheerful and chatty, had gone quiet, checking her phone obsessively, looking toward the front door like she was expecting someone. When Jason asked her what was wrong, she brushed it off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just tired," she'd said. But now, with the memory of that night fresh in his mind and the tape's images etched into his thoughts, he couldn't help but wonder. Was she already expecting this to come out? Did she know the tape existed? Once he watched the tape for the first time, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Not in a paranoia kind of way, but a real, gut-level sensation that made the hair on his neck stand up. He'd walk past his bedroom window at night and catch what looked like a car idling across the street with its headlights off. He told Ryan about it, hoping for reassurance, but instead Ryan leaned in like it was Christmas morning. "Dude, this is like Stranger Things meets true crime," he said, eyes wide. "You realize this might be, like, a cover-up or something, right?" Jason wanted to laugh, but part of him couldn't. Because the more he thought about the tape, the more it felt like someone had left it for him on purpose. It wasn't labeled, sure, but that didn't mean it wasn't targeted. He kept thinking back to that one frame, the one that made him pause, rewind, stare. It was a still image, almost like a freeze frame, showing a baby being held by a man whose face had been deliberately scratched out. And in the bottom corner of the screen, almost too faded to see, were the initials JM. There was no way to explain that. No way to unsee it. In the days that followed, Jason's routine shattered. School felt irrelevant. His grades slipped. He couldn't focus on anything except the tape and what it meant. He dug deeper. He started asking questions. At first, his parents just waved him off, until one night, he pressed his mom hard. He asked her straight out, "Who is the man in the video?" And for a second, her mask cracked. Just for a second. Her eyes flickered, her hand trembled as she set down her glass of water, and she said, "Jason, there are things you're better off not knowing." That's when he knew. Whatever this was, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intentional, and they had spent years hiding it. Jason turned to the only person he trusted outside his family, his late uncle's girlfriend, Leah, who used to babysit him when he was little. She was an artist, lived alone in a cluttered apartment above a bakery downtown, and always treated Jason more like a nephew than a kid. When he told her about the tape, she went pale. Not afraid, but stunned. "Your dad swore that was destroyed," she said softly, more to herself than to him. Jason froze. "You've seen it?" She didn't answer. She just asked, "Where did you find it?" That was the moment Jason realized this went deeper than he'd thought. Leah knew things she wasn't willing to share yet. And the more questions he asked, the more people around him started pulling away. That's when the messages started. Anonymous texts. No number. No name. Just words like, "Stop digging. You're not ready. And once. You'll regret watching that tape." Jason showed them to Ryan, who went full dark web detective, swearing they could trace the number or hack into some metadata. But nothing worked. The messages stopped as quickly as they started, but the tension didn't. And then something even stranger happened. One night, while going through old family albums for the third time, Jason found a photograph that made his heart drop. It was a picture of him as a toddler, except in this one, he wasn't alone. He was sitting on a woman's lap. A woman he had never seen before. She looked young, in her 20s maybe, with dark hair and tired eyes. She held him like a mother would. There was no date, no caption, and no one else in the picture. Jason showed it to his mom the next morning, and she took one look and said, "That's not you." But it was. From there, the suspicion spiraled. Was he adopted? Switched at birth? Part of some kind of government witness protection program? The theories ran wild, fueled by every video he watched on YouTube under Family Secret Uncovered, Found Footage Truth, and VHS Identity Mystery. He couldn't find anything concrete, but he did find one case that chilled him. A missing person report from 2006. A woman named Lila Mendez had disappeared along with her infant son. She had no family, no strong paper trail, and the case was cold by 2008. But her photo, Jason swore it looked like the woman from the snapshot he found. The resemblance was uncanny. Ryan told him it could just be coincidence, that he was seeing patterns that weren't there. But Jason knew better. Something inside him had shifted the moment he watched that tape, like a dormant memory fighting its way to the surface. And the closer he got to the truth, the more reality seemed to warp. People he trusted began acting strangely. His dad started locking the basement door, which had always been left open. His mom began taking long drives without telling anyone. Even Ryan, always curious and eager, suddenly grew cold, distant, like he didn't want to know anymore. When Jason confronted him, Ryan just said, "Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered, man." That wasn't like him. It was as if someone had gotten to him, warned him, or maybe worse, revealed something he couldn't handle. And now, with the mystery swirling, Jason's world is beginning to collapse around him. He has more questions than answers, more leads than conclusions, and absolutely no idea who he can trust. The tape was just the beginning. What it opened up, what it unleashed, is far more dangerous than he ever imagined. But he can't stop now. Because whatever the truth is, it's already started to surface. And someone, maybe multiple people, are working hard to make sure it never comes out. But what none of them realize is this. Jason isn't going to back down. He can't.
Because there's something else on that tape.
Something he missed the first time. Something he saw only for a split second during a frame glitch. But he caught it. A face. One he recognizes, even though he was never supposed to. And once he finds out who it is, that's when everything changes again. Jason hadn't slept properly in days. His eyes burned from hours of staring at paused VHS frames and zooming in on blurry snapshots that might or might not contain clues. Every shadow in the house now felt like it held something or someone watching. He no longer felt like a normal teen living in a quiet town. He felt like a character in one of those true story horror videos people binge late at night on YouTube when they say they're just killing time but secretly want to be scared. The difference was, Jason didn't have the luxury of turning it off. This was his life now, and every step forward came with something unexpected pulling him 2 steps back. And just when he thought he was finally getting somewhere, something happened that made it all 10 times worse. The tape vanished. Not just the tape, but the entire VHS player was in. One night, he left it hooked up in the garage, rewinding a segment he'd marked with a yellow sticky note that read, "Do not record over this." He went inside for dinner, barely picked at his food, then rushed back out to keep working. But the tape and the player were gone. At first, he thought maybe his dad had moved it, thinking it was junk. But when he asked, his dad's face hardened. There was nothing out there, he said flatly, avoiding Jason's eyes. His mom said the same thing. Maybe you imagined it. But Jason hadn't imagined anything. The cables were still there. The power strip was still plugged in. Only the player and the tape were missing. Ryan said maybe it had been stolen, but who would break into a locked garage and take only a VHS player with a broken eject button? The next day, something even more chilling happened. A photo showed up in Jason's locker. No envelope. No name. Just a black and white printout of a screenshot from the tape. A close-up of Jason as a baby in the arms of that unknown woman. Someone else had watched it. Someone else had the tape now. And they were letting him know. Jason brought it straight to Leah, hoping for insight, but her reaction only added to the dread. She stared at it for a long moment, her hand shaking slightly as she held it. "You weren't supposed to see this," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "They promised it was destroyed." Jason pressed her, desperate now. "Who's they? Who knew about this?" But Leah only looked at him with sad eyes, the kind people get when they know something terrible but don't know how to say it. "You need to let this go, Jason. You don't know what you're messing with." That was the last conversation they had, because the next day, Leah packed up and left town. No goodbye. No explanation. Her landlord said she left in the middle of the night, left behind a full fridge, a half-finished painting, and a single note taped to her easel. "Some secrets are poison." That's when Jason started questioning everything, including the people closest to him. He tried talking to Ryan again, but his friend now acted as if the tape had never existed. "I think you're getting obsessed, dude," Ryan said, pulling away when Jason showed him the photo from the locker. "You should seriously talk to someone. Like a professional." That wasn't Ryan talking. Not the real Ryan. He wasn't just scared, he seemed coached. Jason began wondering if someone had gotten to him too. If they had warned him off like they did Leah. He even started wondering about his own parents again, watching them closely at dinner, catching sideways glances they exchanged when he mentioned certain names or places. One night, when they were both asleep, Jason snooped through his dad's office. He found old tax forms, utility bills, nothing unusual, until he opened a drawer filled with old Polaroids. Most were family photos, but then he saw one he didn't recognize. It was a woman in a hospital gown, cradling a newborn. The same woman from the snapshot. And scrawled on the back, in faded ink, "We agreed never to tell him." That was when Jason knew this wasn't just about a lost tape or a long-lost relative. This was something deeper. More planned. More covered up. There was a reason the VHS had resurfaced now at this moment in his life. There was a reason people were trying to erase it all again. And then, just as he was about to put the pieces together, another twist knocked the wind out of him. His school counselor, Mr. Whitaker, who had always seemed like a background character in Jason's daily routine, pulled him aside after class. "Jason," he said softly, "I heard you've been asking a lot of questions. Digging through the past." Jason stiffened. He hadn't told anyone at school about the tape. Not a soul. But Whitaker continued, his tone gentle but loaded. "Some memories, they're locked away for a reason. Not because they're forgotten, but because remembering them could destroy everything around you." Jason stared at him, unsure whether to feel threatened or protected. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Whitaker didn't answer. Instead, he pulled something from his desk drawer and handed it over, a small, plastic key on a worn leather cord. "If you're going to keep looking," he said quietly, "you'll need this. But if I were you, I'd stop now." Then he walked away, leaving Jason with more questions than ever. What was the key for? Why had Whitaker, of all people, inserted himself into this nightmare? And how did he know about the tape, about the photos, about the woman with the tired eyes? Jason thought he was chasing a mystery, but now it felt like the mystery was chasing him. And the deeper he digs, the more people around him start to disappear, or worse, start to change. And just when Jason thinks he's finally closing in on the truth, his phone buzzes with a new message from an unknown number containing only one line. "She's alive, and she remembers you." Jason stared at the message like it might vanish if he blinked. "She's alive, and she remembers you." The words repeated in his head with an almost rhythmic hum, like a song stuck in his brain that he never wanted to hear again. It was impossible, wasn't it? That woman, the one from the VHS, the one in the photo, she had to be gone. Everything pointed to her being a ghost from the past, a name left off records, someone scrubbed clean from his family's history. But this message felt different. It didn't read like a threat. It didn't feel like a random prank from someone trying to mess with him. It felt real. And the part that terrified him most wasn't the idea that she was alive. It was the idea that she remembered. Which meant she had answers. And maybe even more than that. Maybe she had regrets. Jason barely noticed as he sat frozen, phone still glowing in his hand. But before he could even think about what to do next, his phone buzzed again, this time from Ryan.
It had been days since they talked.
Jason hesitated for a moment, then answered. Ryan's voice came through in a whisper, panicked and raw. "Dude, I got one too." Jason's blood ran cold. "What do you mean one?" he asked. Ryan didn't explain right away. He said to meet at the school parking lot. Now, no questions. When Jason arrived, he found Ryan pacing under the one flickering light still working near the old baseball field. He looked pale, nervous, like he hadn't slept either. Without saying a word, Ryan handed Jason his phone. It was a photo, grainy, low light, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakable. It was Ryan's younger sister, Megan. Except she was sitting on a bench in what looked like an abandoned train station, and behind her, half-shadowed, was the same woman from the vis. Jason's stomach twisted. "What is this?" Ryan shook his head. "I don't know. I swear to God, I don't know. Megan disappeared 2 years ago. They said she ran away. We thought maybe she overdosed, or worse. But that's her. And that's the woman from your tape." Jason couldn't speak. Suddenly, this wasn't just about him anymore. Whatever had started in his garage had reached farther than he ever imagined. The clues weren't isolated. They were part of a much larger pattern, one that involved missing people, hidden memories, and whatever had happened all those years ago that someone clearly didn't want uncovered. Jason and Ryan decided to search the train station from the photo. They spent hours combing old Google Maps, local forums, and archived blueprints until they found a match. An abandoned rail line just 30 minutes outside of town, shut down after derailment in the 90s. When they arrived, the air felt unnaturally still, the kind of quiet that buzzes in your ears. The place was half swallowed by ivy and time, the wooden benches warped, and the signage too faded to read. But it was real. The bench from the photo was there. And so was something else. Tucked underneath a loose board beneath the bench was a manila envelope sealed with electrical tape. Inside, they found more photos. Megan wasn't the only one. There were others. Teenagers. All from their area. All labeled with first names and birth dates. And in the corner of each photo was the same insignia, a hand-drawn eye, jagged, almost childlike. Jason felt the world tilt. This wasn't just a personal mystery anymore. This was organized. Methodical. Someone had been keeping track of these kids for years.
But why?
And what did any of it have to do with that VHS? Ryan suddenly stopped flipping through the photos and pulled one out with shaking hands. It was his. A photo of him as a toddler, in a backyard neither he nor Jason recognized. "I don't remember this," Ryan muttered. "That's not our old house. I swear it isn't." And then, from the corner of the envelope, a small key identical to the one Mr. Whitaker had given Jason tumbled out. There were 2 of them now. 2 keys. 2 connections. And the eye insignia was scratched into both. When they returned home, Jason snuck into his dad's office again, feeling more urgency than ever. He opened the locked cabinet using the key from Whitaker and found a series of VHS tapes labeled only with initials and dates, some of them from before Jason was even born. One was marked RW 1999. Another said MB 2004. Jason knew those initials. Ryan Walker. Megan Brown. His heart thudded so loud he could barely hear anything else. But just as he was about to pop one into the old VHS player he'd borrowed from a thrift store, a noise behind him made him freeze. It was his mother, and she was holding the missing VHS from the garage. "You weren't supposed to find this," she said quietly. Not angry, not panicked, just tired, like someone who had carried a weight for too long and knew the collapse was coming. Jason's voice cracked when he asked, "What is this, Mom? What are these tapes? What is happening to us?" She looked at him like she saw him for the first time. "It's not just you, sweetheart," she whispered. "It never was. And now it's too late to pretend." Before he could ask another question, she handed him a folded piece of paper. "If you really want to know the truth, go here," she said. "But don't go alone." Jason opened it and read the address, and his hands began to tremble.
It was a facility.
One that had been shut down after a government investigation nearly 15 years ago. One that never appeared on maps, but everyone in town whispered about. The place they called the farm. And scribbled at the bottom of the paper, in his mother's handwriting, was a message that chilled him more than any photo ever could. "This is where they made you forget." Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was off the moment they pulled away from his driveway. The streets felt unusually empty, but not in a quiet, peaceful way, more like someone had pulled the plug on normal life and left a hollow shell behind. Every turn of the tires seemed louder than it should have been, every flicker of a street lamp too perfectly timed. Ryan was behind the wheel, knuckles white around the steering wheel, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Jason didn't say anything at first. He just watched. Watched the same black SUV follow them through 3 different turns. Watched it pause a little too long at the stop sign near Miller Avenue. And then watched as it disappeared for 5 minutes, only to reappear on the same road they were on now. He knew this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't normal. They were being followed. And whoever was behind them wasn't trying to be stealthy anymore. They wanted Jason to know they were there. He tried to think clearly, to remember everything his mom had ever told him about staying alert, but his thoughts were tangled and chaotic. His heart pounded in his ears, louder than the hum of the engine. All the clues, the tapes, the photo of Megan, the matching keys, none of it prepared him for this. Real danger. Not just abstract theories or unanswered questions. This was someone somewhere, watching every step they made. Jason told Ryan to turn off the main road, take the old fire road that curved behind the forest preserve. It was a long shot, but maybe they could lose whoever was following them. Ryan didn't hesitate. He slammed the wheel left, tires screeching as they cut through dust and gravel. They drove with no lights, barely able to see 10 feet ahead. Every bump making Jason's heart lurch. Finally, after 10 agonizing minutes of blind turns and sudden drops, They stopped behind a cluster of trees. Silence. No headlights. No engine sounds. For a moment, it felt like maybe they'd done it. Maybe they were in the clear. But Jason wasn't convinced. He couldn't be. He pulled out his phone to call his mom, desperate for something, anything, but the call didn't go through. No signal. He tried again. Still nothing. That's when he noticed the strange shimmer on the back of his phone, like a hairline scratch that hadn't been there before. He ran his finger over it, felt the bump, and then he knew. It wasn't a scratch. It was a tracking sticker. Someone had bugged his phone. That was how they knew where he was. How they kept showing up. He yanked the sticker off and crushed it beneath his boot, but the damage was already done. They knew, and they were close. Ryan stared at him in stunned silence. "What the hell is going on, man?" he asked, his voice cracking in a way Jason had never heard before. Jason didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was, even with all the clues they'd gathered, even with the tapes and the keys and the strange message from his mother, he still didn't know who was behind it.
Or what they wanted.
And now, it seemed like the stakes weren't just about the past, they were about survival. When they finally made it home, it was almost 3 a.m. The house was dark, but not in the usual, peaceful kind of way. The porch light, which his mom always left on, was off. The curtains in the living room were drawn shut, and the front door was slightly ajar. Jason's stomach dropped. He told Ryan to wait in the car and approached the house slowly, every step feeling like it echoed across the entire neighborhood. He pushed the door open and called out. No answer. He checked the living room, then the kitchen, then her bedroom. She was gone. Her purse was still there. Her phone too. But the VHS, the one she had taken back, the one she'd handed him just hours ago, that was missing. Jason stood in the center of her room, his breathing ragged, trying not to let his mind spiral. Maybe she went out. Maybe she left a note. Maybe she was with someone. But in his gut, he knew. She hadn't left voluntarily. This was a warning. And they'd made it personal. His mom was the only person who might have had real answers. Now she was just gone. And whoever had taken her, or whatever had happened, left no trace. No sound. No struggle. Just a vacuum. Like she'd been erased. The next morning, Jason filed a missing person report, but it didn't go how he expected. The officer at the desk gave him a blank look when he said her name. He said there were no recent records tied to that address. No tax ID. No driver's license. Jason demanded they look again. He even showed them a photo. The officer tapped a few keys on his keyboard, frowned, then told Jason to wait. He stepped into a back office. Jason waited for 20 minutes before he realized no one was coming back. When he walked out into the hallway, the front lobby was empty. The lights were off. It was as if the entire building had been vacated. He stumbled outside, dazed, the morning sun burning his eyes. Something was very, very wrong. He wasn't just being followed. He was being erased. And he didn't know how much longer he had before it happened to him, too. The only person left he could trust was Ryan, and even that trust was beginning to fray. That night, while Jason tried to rest in his room, he heard footsteps outside his window. Not the usual creaks of old wood or passing animals. Deliberate.
Slow.
Measured. He peered through the blinds and saw a silhouette moving past the garage, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hooded jacket. Jason rushed outside with a flashlight, but by the time he reached the driveway, the figure was gone. In its place, taped to the back of his car, was a piece of paper. Just 4 words written in thick black ink. Stop or she dies. Jason collapsed to his knees, the weight of it all crashing down like a tidal wave. The clues weren't leading him toward the truth anymore. They were leading him toward destruction. And now he had to make a choice. Back off and pretend none of this ever happened, or risk everything, his mother's life, Ryan's safety, and possibly his own, to see it through. But just as he stared at the note in the dim light of his porch, his phone buzzed again. No number. No contact name. Just a single message. You're not the only one left. Jason didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Not after the threat. Not after the message. And certainly not with the creeping suspicion that the people involved in this, Whoever they were watching him from shadows he couldn't even see. As the morning light crawled across his bedroom walls, casting long, restless streaks of gold, he sat at his desk staring at the torn paper from his windshield. Stop or she dies. It looped in his mind like a warning bell, one he couldn't unhear, no matter how much he tried to reason with himself. But what haunted him more than the words was the growing feeling in his gut that the trail he'd been following wasn't just cold, it had been manipulated from the start. The clues, the VHS, the accidental discovery of the key. What if he hadn't found them? What if they had been planted? Or worse, what if someone close had been feeding him breadcrumbs toward a trap? He didn't want to believe it, but the nagging feeling kept pulling at the edge of his thoughts like a frayed thread. So he started combing back through everything, every moment, every clue, every person who'd helped or said something too conveniently timed. And that's when he noticed it. A single frame in the VHS he'd originally thought was a glitch, just static. But when he paused it at the exact second, there was a flash of a face. It wasn't clear, just the shadowed profile of someone half-turned from the camera. But the more he stared, the more it became obvious. It was Ryan. Or, at least it looked like him. Jason's hands trembled. He played it back. Again. And again. And each time, the resemblance became impossible to ignore. Ryan, in the background of a video supposedly filmed before Jason even knew him. Ryan, wearing a jacket Jason had once borrowed last winter. A jacket that hadn't even existed 20 years ago when the tape was supposedly made. Jason's mind raced. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he couldn't shake the image. The timing. The way Ryan always seemed available. The way he never asked too many questions, but always gave just the right answers. Was he being used? Was Ryan involved? He needed to know. So he confronted him. That afternoon, Jason drove out to the skate park where they always used to hang out, and waited. When Ryan showed up, Jason didn't give him time to make excuses. He pulled out the paused frame on his phone and held it up. What is this, Ryan? Why are you in that video? At first, Ryan stared in silence, his jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. Then he looked away, eyes glinting under the sun like he was fighting back something heavy. I was hoping you wouldn't find that frame, he said softly. I try to keep you away from it, but you wouldn't stop digging. Jason froze. What are you talking about? Keep me away from what? Ryan turned to face him fully, and what came next shattered everything Jason thought he knew. Jason, I didn't meet you by accident. None of this is a coincidence. I was sent to watch you, to keep you close in case the past came back. And now it has. The ground tilted under Jason's feet. He couldn't breathe. Sent by who? He demanded. Ryan hesitated, then looked him dead in the eye. By your father. Jason blinked. My father's dead. No, Ryan said, voice low, heavy. That's what you were told. That's what your mom wanted you to believe.
But he's not dead.
He's running this. All of it. The tapes, the disappearances, the threats. Your father is alive. And he's watching you. Everything collapsed in Jason's mind like a house of cards. His father. The man his mother had spoken about in hushed tones. The one she'd said vanished when Jason was a baby. The one she never allowed pictures of in the house. He wasn't some forgotten figure. He wasn't a ghost. He was real. And he was behind everything. Jason staggered back, reeling.
Why?
Why me? Ryan took a shaky breath. Because you're part of it. You were born into it. And now that you've started unraveling the threads, you're not just in danger, you're the key. The words echoed in Jason's head like a thunderclap. His whole life, every memory, every belief, every truth he thought was solid, had been scripted, controlled, choreographed like a movie he didn't even know he was acting in. The person he trusted most, his best friend, had been planted. And the man he thought was long gone was pulling the strings behind a curtain Jason hadn't even seen. Before Jason could respond, Ryan added one final, gut punch twist. Your mother, she didn't tell you everything. That's why she took the tape back. Not to protect you, but to protect herself. Because if the wrong person sees what's on that tape, she dies too. Jason's knees nearly buckled. The VHS wasn't just some creepy homemade recording. It was a loaded weapon. And now, Jason realized he'd been carrying it like a match near gasoline. The enemy wasn't just someone from the outside. It was his own blood, his own past. And if what Ryan said was true, Jason wasn't just being hunted, he was being tested. As Ryan turned to leave, he muttered, "He'll contact you soon. When he does, don't run. He hates that." Then he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Jason standing there, spiraling, with more questions than answers and the terrifying realization that the real game was only just beginning. Jason sat in his car for hours, parked on the quiet stretch of road just a few blocks from his house, completely unaware of the time or even the low hum of the engine still running. His fingers tapped nervously against the steering wheel, the events of the last 24 hours unraveling in his mind like a twisted reel of film. He had watched his entire reality crumble, and now the pressure was unbearable. He wasn't just caught in a mystery, he was part of it. And if what Ryan said was true, he was the center of it all. But the most excruciating part wasn't the fear, or the confusion, or even the growing sense of danger. It was the betrayal, the thought that his own mother, the one person he believed had always protected him, may have lied to him his entire life. The memories that used to come for him, late-night stories, warm hugs, the way she always insisted his father was gone for good, now felt poisoned with uncertainty. If she knew something about the tape, about his father, and kept it hidden from him, what else was she hiding? Jason finally worked up the courage to confront her, even though his heart was pounding in his chest like a warning drum. He walked through the front door, and she was standing in the kitchen as if nothing had changed, chopping vegetables for dinner, humming under her breath. For a moment, Jason considered staying silent, pretending, but he couldn't, not anymore. He set his phone on the counter and slid it toward her. The paused image of Ryan in the VHS frame glared back at her in silence. Her hand froze midair. The knife dropped onto the cutting board with a hollow clink. She stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, then finally looked up at Jason. Her face, always so composed, was different now, tight, drained of color and terrified. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "You knew," Jason said, voice cracking. "You knew all along, didn't you? That he wasn't dead. That this wasn't over." His mother backed away slowly, as if trying to put distance between herself and the truth. "Jason, I did what I had to. For you. You were just a baby. I didn't want his world to become yours." Jason stepped forward. His world? What world? "Mom, what was on that tape? Why was Ryan planted in my life? Why is Dad alive and pulling all the strings?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Only tears. And then, she said something that gutted him completely. "Because he made me choose between you and the truth." Before he could respond, her phone vibrated on the counter. A new message. She looked at it, and her expression collapsed into panic. Jason grabbed the phone and read the screen. "Tell him nothing. Or he disappears next." Jason's blood ran cold. The message wasn't just a threat, it was a direct order, and it confirmed his worst fear. He wasn't in control. Someone was monitoring every move. And now they were making sure his mother stayed silent too. But it wasn't just about her anymore. This was about him. His safety, his sanity, and everyone he still cared about. Later that night, Jason received an anonymous call. The voice on the line was disguised, robotic, but the words sent a chill down his spine. "You want the truth? Then destroy the tape. Walk away from all of it. You'll never hear from us again. Or keep digging, and someone you love dies. Decide by midnight." He stood there frozen, holding the phone to his ear long after the call ended. The ultimatum was clear. Walk away and live in ignorance. Or chase the truth and risk losing someone else, his mother, Ryan, maybe even himself. And the most haunting part was, he didn't know who was making the call. Was it his father? Someone working for him? Or was it someone even higher, part of a network Jason hadn't begun to understand? Jason's emotions spiraled. Fear, rage, helplessness. But what he didn't expect was the slow, creeping doubt. If Ryan was planted in his life, if his mother had been lying, if even his memories couldn't be trusted, then who could he turn to now? Who was still real? With the tape hidden in his backpack, Jason wandered through the cold night air, desperate for answers and completely unsure of who he was anymore. And as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the weight of the decision crushed down on him. Destroy the only piece of evidence that could lead to the truth, or risk the life of someone he loved. Either way, someone loses. But then, just as he sat on the edge of the old railway bridge trying to think, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate, too calm for a stranger. He turned. It was someone he never expected to see again, and they were holding something in their hand. Something that looked like another tape. Jason didn't breathe. He couldn't. His mind froze, trying to make sense of what he was seeing as the figure in front of him stepped out of the shadows and into the pale, flickering light of the train yard floodlamps. It was his high school guidance counselor, Mr. Halvorsen. The man who had once helped him write his college essays, who'd comforted him after his father's death, who'd looked him in the eye and said he had a bright future if he could just keep his head straight. But now there he was, standing like a ghost from a different life, holding a second VHS tape. Jason's thoughts stumbled over themselves. Why him?
Why now?
Mr. Halvorsen had always been kind, almost too kind in hindsight. Too invested. Too eager to steer Jason away from certain questions, certain school projects, certain electives like journalism. Jason felt his legs trembling as he stepped back, instinctively clutching the backpack that held the original tape. What is this? What are you doing here? Mr. Halvorsen raised his free hand, like a cop trying to talk down a suspect. Jason, listen to me. I'm not here to hurt you. But you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. That tape, your father, it's not what you think. It never was. Jason's voice cracked, his throat dry. You were supposed to help me. You were the one person I thought I could trust. Trust. The counselor gave a weak, sorrowful chuckle. Jason, I've been trying to protect you. All these years, every adult in your life, the teachers, the neighbors, even your mother, we were told to keep you away from the truth. Your father didn't die.
He went underground.
Voluntarily. And when he did, he became something else. Someone else. Jason's breath caught. What do you mean? Mr. Halvorsen walked closer, slowly, carefully. He didn't just fake his death. He joined a program. A private operation that was buried so deep, even most agencies couldn't track it. They were experimenting with memory, manipulation, retention, deletion. The tapes weren't just recordings, they were tools. Devices meant to implant selective memories, change identities. Your father wasn't just a subject, he helped build the system. Jason's pulse roared in his ears. His entire childhood had been constructed on a lie, not just about where his father went, but about who he was. If what Halvorsen was saying was true, then even Jason's memories could be compromised. Even his own sense of reality. He staggered backward, his voice rising. And you? You were part of this. Mr. Halvorsen's face twisted with guilt. I was recruited to watch you. To report changes in behavior. To intervene if you got too curious. But I stopped filing reports a year ago. When I saw how they were tracking you, how far they were willing to go, I knew I couldn't keep lying. Jason, your father's still alive. But he's not your father anymore. And if you don't destroy that tape, if you don't stop digging, they'll reset everything. Jason froze. Reset. Halvorsen nodded. They have a second tier. If containment fails, if a subject, like you, starts to remember too much, they initiate a reset protocol. It erases your connections, removes your support systems, implants a different narrative. You'd wake up in a new city, with a new name, believing you'd always been someone else. The world tilted beneath Jason's feet. Every moment of doubt he'd felt, every panic attack, every dream that didn't make sense, they were cracks. Fragments bleeding through. Not just lies, rewrites. Suddenly, Jason's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out. A new message appeared on the lock screen. This one wasn't from an unknown number. Ryan, don't trust Halvorsen. He's one of them.
Run.
Jason looked up, and the counselor's face had changed. Not in expression, but in demeanor. There was something off now. Cold. Calculated. He was watching Jason's reaction too closely, like a handler watching a subject about to snap. And Jason knew, in that second, that he was in more danger than ever. Then another noise, tires screeching behind the train yard fence, doors slamming shut, heavy boots on gravel. Not just one person. A team. Jason had no time to think. He grabbed the tape from Halvorson's hand and bolted, heart thundering in his chest. He didn't know who to believe anymore. If Ryan was a plant, if Halvorson was a traitor, if his own mother was still safe. But one thing was clear, this was bigger than just a lost VHS tape. Bigger than family lies or dark government programs. He was the last loose thread, and someone out there was getting ready to cut it for good. Jason ran. Through the echoing corridors of the abandoned mental health facility, every broken tile and graffiti-covered wall seemed to pulse with a memory not his own. The building had long been gutted, supposedly left to rot after budget cuts in the early 2000s, but someone had been keeping it just functional enough. Wires snaked out from walls, security cameras blinked under coats of dust, and somewhere deeper inside, a low hum vibrated through the floor like the mechanical breath of something still alive. He could feel it now. This was where it had all started. This was where the truth had been born, twisted, and hidden under layers of misdirection. And someone was still watching. The final tape was clenched in his hand, heavier than it should be, labeled only with a single word: Origin. He'd stolen it from Halvorson's car after escaping the train yard ambush. The man hadn't chased him. He didn't need to. Jason knew now that Halvorson was a gatekeeper, not the architect. Just another pawn in a long game built on surveillance, manipulation, and manufactured identity. What lay on this tape wasn't just the story of his father. It was the blueprint of the entire operation, possibly even the undoing of it all. Jason just needed one working machine to play it. He found it at the heart of the hospital, inside a sealed room lined with soundproof foam, and one ancient TV VCR combo bolted to a steel cart. Wires fed from the TV into wall panels that looked like they hadn't seen daylight since before Jason was born. He slid the tape in, his fingers trembling, his mind racing with everything he had seen, the lies, the half-truths, the planted memories, the near escapes. The screen fuzzed, crackled, then rolled into sharp, clean footage. This was no family home video. This was a controlled interview. His father sat under a harsh overhead light, his face gaunt but sharp, eyes moving mechanically as if scanning a prompter only he could see. "My name is Daniel Cross," he began, voice steady. "I am the architect of the Prometheus project." Jason stepped closer. He had to force himself to keep breathing. Prometheus. The word had followed him like a shadow, etched into that first tape, whispered through Ryan's cryptic messages, even scribbled on a burned file he'd uncovered in the counselor's basement. But he'd never understood what it truly meant. Until now. Daniel continued. The project began as a DARPA experiment in cognitive conditioning. We developed the ability to implant false memory sequences using analog video paired with binaural tones. The goal was to create disposable agents, men and women who could be sent into the field, perform missions, and be reset with new lives, never aware of their prior roles. I believed I could control it. I was wrong. Jason watched as his father's expression cracked for the first time, emotion bleeding into his voice. Subjects began to suffer. The layers became unstable. Fragmented personas collided. Some began to remember, and some couldn't forget. I tried to shut it down, but the system was already autonomous. It erased me. It made me forget my own son. Jason staggered back, throat tight. So this was it. His father hadn't abandoned him. He'd been swallowed whole by the very machine he helped build. But why leave the tape? Why now? Then the screen flickered again. A new figure stepped into frame, Jason's mother. His knees buckled. She looked younger, colder. Not the woman who had raised him with gentle hands and overcooked pancakes, but a stern, calculating operator in a gray suit. Subject 037, Jason Cross. Implanted with domestic loss narrative. Monitored for developmental anomalies. Exceeded emotional parameters at age 10. Recommend containment. Jason's world shattered. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee she'd bandaged, every word of comfort, it had all been a role, a cover. He wasn't just a side note in the project. He was the experiment. Suddenly, the lights in the room snapped off. A deep click echoed behind him, the door locking shut. Then a voice filled the room, not from the tape, but from hidden speakers. "We had hoped you'd never make it this far, Jason." He turned, heart slamming in his chest. From the far corner, where darkness had once held only empty furniture, a figure emerged. It was Ryan, but not the scruffy, paranoid friend from school. This version stood straighter, wore a military-style earpiece, and held a small black device in his hand, like a detonator. "You think you uncovered the truth, but this is still part of the program. You're still inside the simulation layer. You think you're awake, but we needed to see how far you'd go if you believed it was real." Jason's mind rebelled. "What are you talking about?" Ryan smiled coldly. "You're not outside, Jason. You're still inside the test chamber. That escape? The train yard? Halvorsen? Even me? All part of your final cognitive stress test. You're not uncovering anything. You're being monitored. Right now." Jason felt the floor tilt beneath him, the oxygen rip from the room. Was any of it real? Was he still in the lab? Was there even a world beyond this building? Then Ryan pressed a button on the black device. But instead of an explosion, the VCR tape ejected with a soft click. The screen turned to static. And then a prompt appeared. "Do you wish to terminate simulation? Yes/no." Jason stood frozen. He looked at the screen, then at Ryan, who raised an eyebrow and whispered, "It's your call. But choose fast. You're not the only one waking up." Jason hovered his finger over the button, heart screaming in his chest. But before he could press anything, the screen flashed white. Cut to black. The screen faded back and with a slow, pulsing glow, as if the world was rebooting itself. Jason gasped, chest rising with a jolt, but when he opened his eyes, he wasn't in the asylum anymore. He was lying on a narrow bed in a sterile white room, walls lined with softly humming machines and a single wide mirror that stretched across the wall. He sat up, slowly, disoriented, not because he'd just woken up, but because everything felt eerily calm. There were no restraints, no guards, no alarms. Just the sound of his own breathing and the subtle rhythm of the machines that had, for who knows how long, been monitoring his mind. He glanced down at his arms, no scars, no bruises, no evidence of everything he'd endured. But his memories remained sharp, seared into him like burns that wouldn't heal. The tape, the betrayal, the fake mother, Ryan, Halvorsen, was it all fabricated? Or had the simulation merely been the final layer over a truth too dangerous to face head-on? A door hissed open beside him. A woman stepped in, dressed not in a lab coat or uniform, but in simple jeans and a navy blue sweater. Her eyes were kind, yet wary. She introduced herself as Dr. Helen Miles, a name Jason didn't recognize, but her voice carried weight, like someone who had seen the entire picture and lived long enough to question whether they ever should have. She told him he had passed, though what passing meant in this context was still murky. The Prometheus project, she explained, had long since been abandoned by its original creators, but remnants of the program, agents, facilities, tapes, still lingered like radioactive dust in the corners of forgotten institutions. Jason's journey had been real and not real. A field test, yes, but one rooted in fragments of his actual past. His father had been involved. The experiments had happened. But much of what Jason experienced had been part of a carefully constructed gauntlet meant to push his mind to its limits and uncover suppressed truths. He was given a choice. He could walk away. His memories could be restored, altered, or erased. He could return to a quiet life under a new name, perhaps even reunited with what family he had left, distant and damaged though it may be. Or he could stay. Work with the scattered few trying to dismantle the final pieces of the Prometheus legacy, help others like him who were still trapped in nested layers of reality they didn't even know they were in. It wasn't a heroic path. There were no guarantees, no glory. Just shadows and secrets. Jason took time to decide. Days passed in the White Room, and each morning he awoke with a clearer mind, but heavier questions. He watched the tapes again, not the simulations, but real archival footage, classified testimony, first-hand accounts from other test subjects who'd broken free. One face haunted him most, a girl named Elise, someone he'd known briefly as a child, whose memory had been scrubbed clean in his mind until he saw her name in the files. She'd been in the project too, but her story ended in silence. The possibility that others were still lost somewhere inside, living fake lives, believing fake families, caught in recursive loops of emotional programming, was something he couldn't ignore. In the end, Jason chose to stay. Not out of vengeance or anger, but because knowing the truth meant bearing the burden of it. He joined a covert network working across the country, former analysts, whistleblowers, even a few ex-operatives who had flipped once they realized they were expendable. Together, they began recovering suppressed data, finding survivors, breaking into long-sealed black sites from New Mexico to upstate New York. Each discovery brought more clarity and more questions. Who had truly signed off on Prometheus? Where had the funding come from after the shutdown? Was there another version, more advanced, still running somewhere underground? Years passed, and Jason found peace, not in comfort, but in purpose. He built a life in the quiet margins of society, always watching, always decoding. He no longer dreamed of his mother, or the fire, or even Ryan. But one night, sitting alone in a safe house outside Seattle, he received a package with no return address. Inside was an old VHS tape. No label, no instructions, just the unmistakable feel of something familiar and terrible. He stared at it for hours before sliding it into the player. The screen lit up. It was him, 10 years old, sitting in a living room that no longer existed, laughing with a woman whose face had been wiped clean from his memory. Then, in the reflection of the TV screen, someone else. Watching.
Smiling.
The footage stopped, and static took over. Jason sat still, heart pounding, a cold shiver crawling up his spine. He had ended the program. He had exposed the players. But the game was still on. And now, someone else had just pressed play.